If you have cell phones, I would ask that you please turn them off or put them on silence, please. We will stand and have pledge of allegiance by Mayor Pro Tem Joyce and prayer by Councilmember Malinowski.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We pause for a moment of shared purpose. May we approach our work with clarity and good judgment, listening carefully, weighing thoughtfully, and deciding wisely. May we keep the safety of those who walk our streets at the forefront, mindful that small choices can have lasting consequences. May we respect the time, effort, and expertise of our commissions and our planning and zoning staff, building on their work with integrity. May we honor the character of our community, protecting its peace, its quiet, and the quality of life that so many value. And may we exercise discipline and stewardship in our finances, remembering our responsibility to both be present and be in the future. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Topics for discussion. This time we will have Jennifer Rosa to come, if you would.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me here. This is to present the Convention and Visitors Bureau mid-year report. So of course, we're on the same fiscal year as you all. So this shares our results from July 1st of 2025 through December 31st of 2025. So I'm going to go ahead and go through this, and hopefully you all are pretty familiar with the way that we present these results. Is it not on?
Turn it on. Tap your button, Jennifer. Yeah.
Hello? Hello?
No.
Maybe now?
Sheer random. Sheer random choice, Vince. Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me now? I think that one does work. Okay. Okay. Do you all want me to go ahead? Okay, thank you. So Jennifer Rosaleon, and I'm presenting the mid-year report from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we'll just go through it. Of course, the work of the Convention and Visitors Bureau is to boost economic vitality and development by inspiring tourists to come, stay, and take part in the local tourism economy. And the main way that we do that is, of course, through all of our marketing and advertising efforts. So we're just going to go through our results in that PESO model of marketing, which is paid advertising, earned media, social media marketing, and owned assets. So starting with our paid advertising, this is our traditional advertising, of course, our billboard on 441, our banner at the Augusta State Visitor Information Center. We do digital advertising campaigns as well that are focused on the spring and summer to really drive tourism. For earned media, of course, you all know this is one of the areas of our main investment and a lot of the work that we do, a lot of the success that we see. We're really happy to show that in this mid-year for the fiscal year, it's again another best year ever for our earned media. We surpassed our goal so far. We've already delivered 67 media stories. That's 2.33 billion impressions. And when we look at the advertising value equivalency, so what you would pay for that earned media, those public relations efforts that we did. If it was actual paid advertising, that'd be $435,000. And so again, we're seeing this is really one of the leading investments that we can do to get a lot of movement and awareness for our destination. Again, with our public relations, just showing how much work we put into it. We went after a Hospitality Sales Marketing International Adrian Award, which is a very prestigious award for public relations efforts, and we were able to win the bronze category for that. So just showing that we're doing a really good job in that investment and in those efforts paying off far and above the investment that we put on it. We get a great return. Next, it just kind of goes through some of the areas that we've had our public relation efforts seen in. So we've had features with Southern Living, Magnolia and Moonshine magazine, Northwest Georgia Living. Of course, we've started hosting travel influencers as well, as more people are looking to social media to really determine where are they going next. So this just highlights some of the big stories that we were able to get through our PR efforts in that first half of our fiscal year. Next is social media marketing, another main area of investment. This is something that we really went after with a new person that helped to really kind of elevate our social media efforts. And so again, it's trying to enhance that brand awareness to get more people to know about Madison and Morgan County and inspire them to come and stay and visit and tour here. So let's see, my button wasn't working. So with our Facebook, we do have those goals to increase our followers, to increase our reach. This was a best year ever already with our followers increase for Facebook. So we gained 2,365 new followers, and I'd say a lot of that is also with those efforts that we put into PR and hosting those influencers that really create awareness about our destination and gets people wanting to follow us and see what's happening here in Madison and Morgan County. So that's almost 2 times of our goal. In comparison, for the last full fiscal year, we had an 18% increase over the full year, but already just at this mid-year, we're up 17% in followers. So it's really, really paying off that extra investment into our social media. We're already at 72% of our goal for impressions with 253,000 impressions. So that's how many people have had the opportunity to view the different posts and things that we've put out through Facebook. Instagram is another main platform that we focus on. We have 6,680 followers, so we are trying to increase our following by 7%, so we're almost there already just at the mid-year. And we've reached 31,000 potential Instagram users on our Instagram platform. Pinterest is another one that we focus on. And again, this just shows, 14,000 impressions, 119 saves. This is a smaller platform, but this is a really interesting one because it hits people more in the planning stage than the building awareness stage, which Facebook and Instagram do. So this is more of an organic effort, but just trying to get people to, beyond the awareness, actually think about pinning and saving and planning trips through Pinterest to come and visit us. And this just shows some examples of our top performing posts. And you can see beyond just those new things that people get excited about, Southern Living, when we reposted one of those stories that we earned, that was one of our best performing ones. So again, just capitalizing on when we're having influencers and media here, that just gives an extra testimonial and showing other people think how amazing our town is beyond us just saying it. Then when we get into our owned assets, this is more of an organic strategy with visitmadisongeorgia.com. This is one of those things that when we completely reworked our website a few years back to be mobile first, we really, really focused on that search engine optimization to look at what keywords people are searching for and going after and grow content in that so that we show up first in search. You'll see this is a little bit different because we didn't put our goals in here like we usually do because as I'm sure you're all aware with the change in AI, the way that search engine optimization works is really, really changing. So as opposed to, before when it would deliver results and people would click through to your site, a lot of times, especially with Google, it's returning those AI results directly. So it's saying, you're asking it a question, it's delivering the answer. It will show where it's scraping the information from so people can click through, but most people aren't clicking through to the actual sites. They're kind of learning that information. So it really is changing how people search and interact with things. A lot of destination marketing organizations are seeing their traffic go down about 30% because of this AI integration into search engines. We're really lucky because ours has been pretty static, but when we're always seeing so much growth, that's kind of unusual for us. So we were only up 2% in our traffic, but I think that's still a win because we know that other destination marketing organizations are really going down. And my vice chair had a really good point when I, shared concerns about that, and that our information is probably being seen more than ever. It's just not being tracked because it's directly through those AI results. And he thinks that, eventually it will be tracked. And so the numbers will just go up because we're always one of the top places that AI pulls from when they're asking questions about Madison and Morgan County and our attractions. But we are still on track, so at least it's not going down, but it is static for our sessions to our website. And that'll just be a learning curve as AI learns and we learn AI. Then, of course, our Welcome Center. We welcomed 4,592 visitors, and that is, just on track. It's pretty static there as well for the Welcome Center as people really look more online to figure out where they want to go and what they want to do, but it is staying steady. Our e-newsletter, that's something we started about 3 years ago, I think, and that just continues to grow. We've had a 6% increase. We're really trying to grow that even more, so I have a new investment in gaining new newsletter followers. That's a really great way to directly reach people and share what's happening now to get them to want to come in every season. Again, we're maintaining a really positive open rate at 48%, which is above the industry average. And then some first ever things that we did in trying to share more with the community about what tourism is, why is it important. We hosted our first ever Wild About Tourism Day. We're really lucky to have most of our city council here as well. Showing off those new attractions that we have here, getting our local community to see them and experience them, and then just give more information about that impact of tourism and what are our main areas of focus so that they can get in on that. So it was a lunch and learn and an exclusive safari tour. And then, of course, just more information about the Adrian Awards. So that's everything that I have. Do y'all have any questions?
Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate that report.
Thank you.
Safety concerns on North Main Street, lack of police presence and traffic enforcement in the area. Probably Matt.
We're good. Good, Ken. Yeah.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Bromley Metz Crackmeyer. My husband, Mike, and
Lydia.
My name is Bromley Metz Crackmeyer, and my husband, Mike, and I live at 651 North Main Street. We're the last white house in the historic district on your left, going towards the bypass. We're here today to bring attention to several safety concerns on North Main Street. Mike has his notes. He's going to take over from here.
Thanks for having us this morning. There's a couple of things that we wanted to bring to your attention. The first one, and we feel like this is a pressing issue for our community, is the lack of a crosswalk on North Main Street, other than the one that's right here in front of the Bank of Madison. We have lots of neighbors walking dogs, running. The kids are coming out of school in the afternoons and in the morning trying to cross North Main Street. Some of them live on the other side of the railroad, so they're walking home or they're walking to school. There's no way to cross North Main Street safely. There's nothing that slows anybody down. I walk a couple of our dogs, and if I do it very, very early in the morning when there's no traffic, it's fine. But if I do it at 9 o'clock in the morning, it's an event to get across North Main Street. I know we have lots of neighbors that come from south of town that walk up to our part of town and walk back around. So we really feel strongly that there needs to be some spot where there's signage. I don't know if we need the little orange flags or not. I'm not a big fan of those, but you know, a sign that shows a crosswalk would help allow people to safely cross the street. And it's really becoming a problem because the lack of it is just concerning. And you know, we live down on that side of town, and we see the amount of traffic and the speed at which the cars are coming into and out of town, and it's alarming. Our house will be on tour in 1 month, and I'm very concerned about the people that are going to walk down on the other side of the street, want to come into our house to see it, and how they're going to get across. Or they're going to drive down there, park on Billups or one of those other side streets and try to cross the street. In our opinion, you know, right at the corner of College and North Main would be a great place for a crosswalk because it's at the top of that hill. You can see it in both directions, and it would be, I think, a great safety improvement for the community. The second thing that I wanted to bring up is the amount of speeding cars that comes into our town from the bypass. It is alarming, the speed at which they come off that bypass and they come into town. Now, we have a sign down there that when it recognizes your speed, it blinks, but it's halfway covered up by one of those, I think those are crepe myrtles or something else. So if you're not looking for the sign, you don't see the sign until it's too late. We have experienced people that are coming into town, they actually use the turn lane as a passing lane to get around cars to get into town. And I think that they think that if they can get it down below 45 by the time they hit Chris Lambert's house, they've done a good job. But it's really alarming that these cars are coming into town so fast. And it's also equally bothersome that when they are coming out of town, as they're coming up the hill, you can just hear them gun their cars because they're on that straightaway. They see that open 3 lanes and they're off to the races. We don't see any police presence at all on North Main Street, either slowing people down, writing tickets, giving warnings. I don't know. We have not seen a Madison police officer down there. Now, we're not out there 24/7, so I can't say it's not happening. We have seen the Georgia State Patrol on a handful of occasions set up down there and stop people and write tickets or give them warnings. I don't know. But I think we live in a pretty small community, and we kind of have a reputation for knowing of what's going on in the community. And if we had a police presence out there actually stopping people, that would have a huge impact on the cars coming into and out of the town. It's alarming. The difference between a car going 35 miles an hour and 48, 49, 50 miles an hour is pretty significant when you're trying to walk a dog, or you're just walking, or you're trying to cross the street. So we would just like to ask that the city council take a look at this. If the speed limit sign could be moved down closer to the Golden Pantry or even the Mexican restaurant where it's out in the open and it can be seen, I think that would be a huge help. If there is a crosswalk that could be put there, I think that's a win for our city. And I look at the south side of town, and you can go down South Main Street and you have multiple places where you can cross the street. And I completely understand that when the visitors come to Madison, 90% of them go in that direction, so I get it. But we have people that live here that try to cross our street, and it's dangerous. Thank you for letting us talk about this. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
Sure.
In my tenure here, there's at least 3 residents of South Main or North Main that have fairly regularly brought up these issues. And I know that when we bring them up, we're quick to say, well, it's the state might not let us do this, or maybe we can't do that, or whatever. But I'm mindful that this is their neighborhood, just like your neighborhood. This is their neighborhood, and they're talking about the safety in their neighborhood. So, and I don't know whether the chief or our city engineer wants to comment today. I don't want to put him on the spot or whatever, but why don't we commit to reporting back to the council at that very next work session with a plan of action? Because it's just too easy to kick the can through no fault of anyone's. It's, when you're dealing with the state, it's a difficult situation, and crosswalks or whatever. But what Mr. Crackmeyer is asking in terms of the crosswalk is simply common sense. I mean, if you go down there, look at that intersection. I mean, you have to do you have to be an Olympic sprinter to get across the road without hoping to get hit. And there's also the issue of speed. And I'm mindful that we have a device that the city can put out there, and we have, and it tells you exactly how many people are speeding over a certain number of the speed limit. But you know, if you get hit by a car that's only doing 32, you got hit. And so it is a safety issue. And so there's the data that we can retrieve that tells you very matter-of-factly how many cars in a 24-hour period are going too fast. That and a quarter isn't going to help a kid who gets hit when they're trying to cross the street in their bike. I just think it's a safety issue, and I think that I'm blessed to know that Mr. Crackmeyer and Ms. Metz, they're honorable people that give a lot to this community or whatever, and I think we owe it to them and to others, and to the other residents of South Main and North Main that have brought this up. It just keeps coming back and back and back, and I think we need to do better than to say, well, I'm sorry, the state won't let us do it, or maybe we'll get to it, or whatever. I'd like to suggest that we have a response by the next work session to this council on a plan of action.
Thank you. So, and I can attest to, it is a heavily used area there. I mean, even trying to get out into the street is heavy. I don't think we really take it in consideration. The kids that's walking to school, there's Lambert Park there that everybody's playing in. So I can appreciate John's comment, but the council looking into that. Yeah.
And Ms. Mayor Perriman, if I may, that intersection not only is College, but on the other side is North Avenue, and that is the route that many 18-wheelers take from the 3 manufacturing plants across the railroad track. So we have 18-wheelers merging, well, they have to stop, but we have 18-wheelers coming onto Main Street right there. And if I can give you, if you can see this in your mind's eye, when you're going down the hill with the Golden Pantry on your right, you've got this large center lane that many cars, I've been passed in that center lane on both sides of North Main with cars trying to get around me. And oftentimes the middle schoolers will walk down College to cross to go to the Golden Pantry, and they wait in that center lane to make it to the other, you know, across the other lane of traffic. So in my mind, if we, and I did meet with y'all 5 years ago when
I was going to ask
moved
that.
here
Yes.
about the speeding and the lack of enforcement on North Main Street. And I listened to some council members then talk about how they had visited, how since we are historic Madison right there, that we could have some different the speed limit in front of our house is 35. And, and I know Eric and I spoke about this at length, because this is a historic district that we may not have to abide by all the DOT, regulations. I'm not sure about that, but we did speak about that. I would love to see, because we do have so many 18-wheelers coming off of the bypass, a flashing yellow light at College, since we do have Lambert Park right there, and we do have lots of people crossing, that signifies a crosswalk. Hey, guys, you're coming into where people are gonna be trying to cross the street. You need to start pumping the brakes. We hear those truckers using their air brakes because they're not wanting to depress the pedal. So I think this would be such an attribute for the residents of Main Street, and I appreciate City Manager Clem bringing that to. This is our neighborhood, and a lot of times I let my temper get the best of me and yell at motorists who are just laying on the gas. And we're out there with our animals, you know, and I think about people with their baby strollers, and I know we just don't want to see any kind of fatality, but I'm fearful that we possibly could with the speed.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Sorry.
No. May I, Miss? I remember when you was here 5 years ago. That is actually my district, and the same things that you're talking about now, we talked about 5 years ago. We even talked about the tree being in front of the radar sign. So I definitely would like for us to move forward. I've been there my entire life. I am not in the historical district, but I am right down the street from you. So I see a lot of kids. I actually leave my home and I walk to the elementary school every morning. It's a lot going on in our community. So we do need more police presence, not just on Main Street, but even on the other side of the tracks as well. So I totally agree with you guys, and thank you for coming in to speak about it.
Mayor, could I say something?
Sure.
I can't believe that was 5 years ago.
Yeah,
And
5
I
years.
cringe to say this, but what we've accomplished in 5 years, we moved one, well, not totally zero. We moved one sign, a 35-mile-an-hour sign, across the street from you guys to a better location, kind of in the big deal category. And we cut some of the bushes in front of the digital sign. That's not much progress for 5 years. The city tends to fall back repeatedly on the defense that it's a state highway, we don't have the right to do it. That's all true. But I don't even know what the process is to get approval from the state to do a crosswalk. I mean, we got Aaron Wadley here. I'm sure later on we can talk with Aaron and find out, do we submit a plan, to John's suggestion, do we submit a plan to them that they then approve? I don't think we've ever submitted a plan. We just say, well, they have to approve it, but I would think we have to give them something.
Well, we must know what the process is because we got other crosswalks across Main Street on both sides
Right.
of the town square. So
That's
there's
right.
clearly a process.
That's
and
right.
It's
Yeah.
just a matter of
Yeah.
doing it. The sign, the radar sign, it needs to be moved. If you're not looking for that sign, by the time you realize and you see it,
You're right up on it.
you're already past the opportunity to slow down. So, I'm not a proponent of cutting down trees, but to me, either you cut down those trees so you can see the sign, or you move the sign
That's right.
down to where people can see it.
That's right.
That would be a big help. When you're coming in town from the south side, we have the same sign down there. And you can see people. The second that thing starts blinking, you can see their brake lights. The other great thing about South Main is the volume of traffic is so high that it automatically slows people down that are coming into town because we have enough local people following the speed limit. But on our side of town, that is not the case.
Nope.
And there are a lot of people at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning
Yes.
that come right through Madison
Yes.
and they're going to Eaton 10 or somewhere else to work, and they don't care that that sign is flashing at them. They are going 50, 55 miles an hour, and they do not slow down. So that sign would be more effective if we could move it. I suspect that it's sitting there because that's a power pole and it needs power. That's my suspicion. But I don't know, but I'm just telling you
It's solar.
that I've taken pictures prior to when we trimmed the trees and after, and it didn't make a whole lot of difference. But, you know, the sign, getting a police presence out there and writing some tickets.
Tickets.
I'm not a proponent of making a speed trap, but that would be very effective. And ultimately, a crosswalk needs to be put at that intersection.
To that point, Mayor, Aaron's right there. Could you very briefly, Aaron, just borrow the mic and let us know what is the process?
All right. So there is a process. We have to appeal to safety at the state, which is our local traffic engineer at District 2. We have to meet with them, formally request that crosswalks be added to the state safety assessment. I'm doing this currently for the town of Bostwick, and it's actually a lengthy process. Unfortunately, it's been several months because they have a team that has to review it. I think our situation's a little clearer. We do have a resurfacing contract coming up. Maybe we can appeal to them to provide some quick response funds and do this under this paving contract. There are some line items for them to redo some of our ADA ramps and crosswalks. Maybe we can extend those further, get some quick response funds from the state. I'm happy to call Kedrick, our district traffic engineer, and talk about this and write a quick response letter just asking for some funds to do this. I think we should probably look at 3 different crossings, one at maybe Bernie or Park, one at College, and then maybe a mid-block further north. I think planning has identified these needs. Public Works and our police chief have all identified this as well as a need. But it is generally a lengthy process. I think we're at a good opportunity to expedite it, and I'll make those calls today and see what we can get moving, and I think we can probably get some fast response out of the state on at least one of these crossings.
And I'm sure you'll probably let our city manager know once you hear something in concrete. And John, you will let the council know the results of what area.
I will report at the next work session.
Good,
Yep.
good.
I think I remember somebody saying something the last time I addressed this about, oh, there's nowhere to pull over speeders, but we have several, we do have several cross streets from my house down to the bottom of the hill where where downtown starts. So I feel like that was kind of an excuse. But I do remember that, Eric, we did talk about, because we are the historic district, that we may be exempt from some of these DOT regulations. So maybe y'all could pursue that further. Sorry, Betsy, go ahead.
I think that is true, yeah.
One thing, is my mic on? I guess it is. Anyway, one thing we've been told over and over, because of the issues on Main Street forever, is that, and our police chief is here, and Aaron, I think it came from him, that we can't write tickets on Main Street, speeding tickets. Our police force,
Why?
Why?
isn't that we don't, sorry, we can't do speeding tickets on Main Street. It is on our permit now, okay.
What? Under 25, there's nowhere even on North Main Street that's
In town.
But when it's 35, we can, okay, all right.
So it just goes from 45 up on the hill when you come off the bypass to such a short distance, and then it's 35. So I feel like,
But across the signal at 55 is part of the problem.
yeah.
Yes.
And I've talked to GDOT about retiming the signal to encourage more vehicles to take the bypass.
Yes.
But the easier path is to go straight. It's a longer signal coming from the Georgia Pacific plant. And so trucks generally go straight because they can't make that left turn if the signal's so short or runs multiple cycles before it'll come on. And I've had reluctance from GDOT to retime that signal at the bypass. I think it's part of the issue.
I think what Brownlee was referring to, if I'm not mistaken, Chief, there's a state law that we can't write speeding tickets less than 8 miles over the speed limit, but the exception to that is in school districts and properly signed historic districts. And that's why some years ago, many years ago, we put up signs saying that entering a historic district, which should give us the ability to strictly enforce the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit.
We would be able to enforce it at 41, that point, that'd be great.
So 6 miles over, okay. Can I borrow one of your little, and I could just do like a citizen's report?
I've got one.
But did we just mention,
I live on South Main, I've got one.
did we just mention running a line to gauge speed back there? Have we done, you guys do that, right?
We did a traffic study.
How long ago was, you have it, or no?
Oh, that
Oh, you do?
was-
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay,
I
good.
don't feel like this is on, but.
You wanna come up here next? Thank y'all so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So, when we initially received the email from 651 North Main, it was back in February 28th is when they noted their concerns to us. Just a day or two after that, we set up our little Metro counter to do a volume traffic study. We set it up on Main Street at Billups, just right down the corner from College Avenue, and ran it for a period of 7 days. And over those 7 days, we had a total of 49,260 vehicles traveled both ways on North Main. The average speed was 35 miles an hour. The 85th percentile, which, Aaron, correct me if I'm wrong, that's how traffic engineers dictate the,
That is the design speed.
is 39.9 miles an hour. Only 50 vehicles over that 7-day period traveled above 55 miles an hour. So, just based on the data alone, it's not an issue. I completely understand the perceived issue. If there's a perceived issue, there is something that we can do. But, when we dictate where our officers go do traffic enforcement, we do it in highest traffic crash areas in order to reduce that. And over the last year, we've been very successful at it. Our wrecks or crashes in Madison are down 12% year over year. And our traffic enforcement is up over 100%, which is reflective of that decrease in traffic crashes. But that doesn't mean that we can't do things. Apologize, I'm coming over cold. A little bit better. We can definitely address some of the improper passing over in that area, so we can redirect the resources in order to, address that problem and the occasional speeder that does decide to use it as a Road Atlanta. Yes, ma'am.
The issue with those stats is that all it takes is one car to kill
That's it.
somebody.
That's it.
That's right.
That's it.
It's like,
Yeah.
And I'm really excited that we're gonna talk about crosswalks later. I did a happy dance when I saw that. I've become kind of a crosswalk connoisseur, and I've been looking at crosswalks as I've traveled. And there's some really creative options that are not just basically lines on the street kinds of things. And I would really like to explore those. Mr. Mayor, if you would like to have some council involvement in that conversation, I would gladly participate in that conversation. It's amazing. This thing out here, this elevated one right out in front of the door, that would slow people down in a hurry.
GDOT will not allow that one.
And,
If you see me out there one night with a shovel,
Aaron could probably speak better to this than I can, but there's a repaving project ahead for that area North Main, so it may be a significant period of time before we're able to put a crosswalk down, because it would just get tore right back up.
Can't we do like little road projects, like a week at a time, and that just shuts down, the center lane? I mean, just like, oh, we're just doing some exploratory work here. Oh, no, just about every, 300 yards.
Sometimes we do that. It's usually utility related.
Please don't do it on North Main Street, where I live. Thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate that.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to say, because Sean hasn't spoken, we need to look to move that sign. And Chief, think about a greater presence. And I know you have a lot of challenges or whatever, but when a resident says they never see, that's a pretty sobering statement. So let's think about that.
Yes,
These
I-
hot-tier system for transportation impact review requiring zoning action. Jill?
Good morning. I'm already
Good morning.
here. So this is kind of a similar topic. Doesn't have to do with speed, but it does have to do with traffic. So in front of you, you have a drafted transportation impact review with increasing concerns about traffic. Y'all wanted to consider us requiring certain land uses submit traffic impact letters. So that is what this chart is in front of you. These are land uses that are permitted conditionally in various zoning districts. There are 3 different tiers. As you may know, most gas stations operate 24 hours, so they are 24-hour traffic generators, but a land use such as a church only has high traffic at certain hours of the week. So that is why there are 3 different tiers. Take a few minutes to look over the land uses, and then in brackets, though, that's just where the zoning districts permit these conditionally. There are no uses on here that are permitted by right, just because planning and zoning, or at least I wouldn't see those come through. So the point of this chart is just to kind of trigger when they're submitting their conditional use application. I would say, oh, you need to submit a traffic study now. How we've been doing this now is if we have, we actually don't have any land uses that do require that they submit traffic studies. It's actually only planned developments that actually require it. So if we have an applicant come through that we think might be a high traffic generator, we'll ask Manager Clem, do you think we should require this applicant to submit a traffic study? And he'll say yay or nay. It's usually yes, because they usually are high traffic generators. So these are just some of the land uses, or these are the land uses to consider. But to get into more details about the 3 different tiers, these will obviously take different hours to assess. I cannot confidently read a traffic study and understand and explain it to y'all. That's why we have Mr. Aaron Wadley. So we actually worked with him for him to kind of estimate how many hours these different services would take him. And then we worked with him to come up with different costs for each of the tiers. We're not married to these numbers, so if y'all have concerns or suggestions, we'd be happy to assess that. So tier number 1, for the land uses in that tier, they would be required to submit a basic transportation impact letter, and Aaron would review that and provide staff with information about that, as well as y'all with information about that. Tier number 2 would be for land uses that might generate a medium to high traffic volume. They would get both of the services, and I'm sorry, that would be a formal email from Aaron for tier number 1. And then tier number 2, they would get everything with tier number 1, but in addition to that, we would also get a formal letter from Aaron with more details. And then tier number 3 would be for land uses that are higher traffic volumes. We would get everything in tier number 1 and 2, and that would be a formal letter, and then Aaron would also be present at the final hearing to present and answer any questions y'all might have for the application. So we do have a note here that says city manager can waive or reduce transportation impact letter requirement as necessary. So these aren't necessarily written in stone. If John thinks that, or if y'all are concerned about, do we really want to charge this much for a church that's coming in? So just something to consider. And some of these might not be concerns of y'all, but this is just what I kind of drafted to what I thought would be higher traffic volumes. So just let me know if you have any questions. Do you want to add anything?
I just want to add a minor point to something. Thank you for all that information, and we're here to answer any questions you might have. But all zoning actions have for the application requirements, there's a final line item on every single application, zoning text, variance and conditional use, that says any additional information that is desired by the city manager. And so The city manager has the authority and has utilized that authority in the recent past to require transportation information from applicants. This isn't taking the place of that. What this is passing the burden of the cost for someone to review that information and confirm it looks accurate and that it is all of the information we need to pass that cost on to the applicant. So the applicant this isn't taking the place of them hiring a transportation engineer if we are requesting a full transportation study. They have to do that. This is then saying those reviews that we want to do internally, that we don't have the skill set as non-engineers to be able to assess that and make sure that it's full and complete and make recommendations based on the information. This is passing the cost, that burden on to the applicant as opposed to being borne by the taxpayer as has been done over just the past couple of zoning actions that we have had. Where we have asked either Aaron or Jacobs Engineering to review the transportation information that's been provided to us and give us recommendations for what that could look like in terms of conditions that you could place on an application or a zoning action.
So there's in our packet for another subject, I think it's for the Gateway signal permit, there's a kind of equivalent of a traffic study, I guess. It's about 50 pages, and to Jill's comment, who can understand any of that stuff, to be honest? So is that example of that really long-winded, detailed report, is that an example of the Tier 3 TIL?
It would be a review of that report. So when we ask the applicant.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Okay.
So there are, I believe there's different levels of traffic studies, but that one would be for a gas station, would need to submit something that detailed.
So the applicant would pay for that study and then pay for Aaron to translate it into
That's
normal
right.
English so we know what the heck he's talking about, right?
Yes.
I like it.
Okay, any more questions for Jill or Molly? If not, thank you so much.
And I would just ask Tony for process here. It is not my understanding that any of this needs to be reflected in the zoning ordinance, simply the schedule of fees. But if there's additional information you think needs to be included in the zoning ordinance as part of that administrative section, if you could let us know.
And I think this is great because it's really the one issue that pervades so much of what we do from citizens is issues about traffic. And Bromley and Mike kind of just demonstrated that. It's anything we do that can find solutions for traffic in Madison is really what our citizens want us to do. And I think this is a real good step in that direction and putting the cost where it really belongs not on the taxpayer, but on the applicants. So thank you for that.
Madison Gateway signal permit error.
All right. So you have a request for a permit to GDOT. And I think we may actually be missing the permit itself from the agenda today. One posted online, I didn't see it in there.
I think I believe it's on a called meeting agenda following this work session.
Okay.
Am I right?
That's not a call meeting, yeah.
Potentially. I couldn't find that one online, but I've got the permit pulled up. And this is, I'm not going to go into the 50 pages of study for two different rapid flashing beacons, but this is a permit to GDOT as part of our Gateway project, requesting that GDOT allow us to install a traffic signal, a rapid flashing beacon. That is a pedestrian pushes the button, and then you get the strobe light that lets traffic know that somebody's crossing the road there. This is at two locations, at Washington and Pearl, and at Washington and what is the other one, Monica?
It's between there and the,
Mid-block, right?
it's a mid-block.
And Fifth Street?
Close enough.
Yeah, but the permit itself says we have to apply as a city because it's our project, even though GDOT is funding the project through federal funds. And the permit just says that GDOT's not responsible for any cost related to utilities, and that they can add or remove this signal or make changes to this signal at any time. And so we need council approval to sign the permit. It's a no-cost permit at this point, but there will be likely some kind of data utility fee and some kind of electrical utility fee in the future. These will be metered locations. And so there'll be a small cost ongoing, as there are at all traffic signals, just to maintain the traffic signal and the data. That's what you're agreeing to, something far in the future at this point. But this is, at this point, holding up the Gateway project. We have to get this approval to move forward in design and finish all the design components. So with that, are there any questions? This is generally a formality, but we want to bring it just because of some cost overruns on these projects. We want to make sure the council's aware of anything that could potentially lead to any cost.
You say small cost, estimated small cost.
I actually don't know, but it's a utility bill, so I would anticipate something up to a couple $100s a month potentially, but I don't actually know what those costs are. I don't know what the power usage is on these. And I'm sorry I don't have that information. And again, it's something out in the future, but it is critical to this Gateway project.
So who would be responsible for those signals out?
So they would be put in as part of the project. If and when the project actually goes to construction, this will be a component of the construction cost. So we're agreeing to the signal already by saying we're agreeing to construction if we move forward on that in the future. This is particularly pertaining to any cost outside of construction cost that may be related to the signal. The permit just says GDOT is not responsible for those costs. The city of Madison is, for all specifically mentions data cost or electricity cost. And it just says GDOT, you may be paying that cost, but GDOT still owns the signal. And that's just in layman's terms. So again, it's generally a formality, but it is something that every city has to agree to get anything like a pedestrian signal installed. And that is going to be a critical component. GDOT's not going to allow these mid-block crossings without some kind of pedestrian signal on Washington Street.
Does the signal you're referring to, is that similar to what we see up in Athens with the pedestrian activated strobe lights? It's not a traffic red light, green light signal.
It's not a traffic red light, green light. It's pedestrian activated strobe lights.
Yeah, those are really, I love those. Those are really, that's the best. And I think with the traffic study, the efforts to get some raised medians in certain areas, a raised crosswalk makes even more sense, I think.
Makes it much safer.
Mhm.
I don't know that this is one of those areas because we're 2 lanes, but there will.
It's not, because it's also a state highway.
And it's a state highway. So state really dictates what we do here. But this is just to get pedestrians off of Pearl and then mid-block further down on Washington. So.
And you mentioned two locations. Those aren't 2 separate crosswalks. Those are 2 possibles for the one crosswalk. Is that right?
They're 2 separate crosswalks. We're requesting 2 signal permits.
Oh.
And
Why?
you have two studies attached in the agenda. And Monica has more information on this. She's been following this since day one.
Would one
Yes.
crossing not do the trick and save a whole bunch of money?
It doesn't, it could save a whole bunch of money, but the intention is to try to slow traffic down before it reaches the downtown, where the crossings and crosswalks in front of the James Madison Hotel and the cluster of restaurants are there. By the time people are topping that hill, they are at top speed. They're not slowing down, they're speeding up.
So-
And so The engineer and the planner for the preliminary engineering recommended that we explore both one at Pearl, which we feel is absolutely necessary, and because there is no safe crossing over 83 at all, and then a mid-block crossing given the plan for the whole area. However, he also said you probably put in for 2 and you may only get 1 anyway. So, but again, as Aaron said, this is a perfunctory, this is for work we've already paid for.
Yeah, no current cost on this. This is just to keep the project moving. The mid-block crossing would be closer to Jefferson Street, so it would be, we've got a park in between Pearl and Jefferson, so it is an ideal location to have a second crossing if GDOT allows it.
Okay. Is that more questions for Aaron?
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Staff report status update on staff recommendation include a language revision and term definition related to established standards. Betsy?
I guess, do we have somebody speaking to the standards?
We didn't know this was on the agenda, so there's no one prepared to speak today.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm happy to listen and take notes and discuss.
No, and that'll be fine. I remember the last time we talked about it, staff had suggested they would go back and look at the language and, kind of refine some of the definitions and such. So forgive me, I did not know I needed to.
That wasn't a smack. It was just, we didn't know there was anything else related to planning on the agenda, and Molly didn't go over anything in the direct report yesterday. So,
Okay.
as far as we knew, there wasn't anything else, but if you've got anything else you want to drive a fine point on or give some feedback on, if you'll let me know, we'll make sure to have a report for your next work session.
Well, I think we can still discuss some of it, but obviously we wanted to, at staff's suggestion, when we expressed concern about how the staff report was being viewed, how it was being utilized in terms of making decisions, I think we all felt like we just really needed to tighten up that language, and we needed to kind of make it more clear about how one, I guess, interprets the staff report. And one of those was, if I'm remembering correctly, the definition of hardship. So you guys had, and again, it's fine. The idea was we'd like you to look and define that, look at that more closely. Let's look at some of the other terms. You look at this every day. This inside and out. You might have some ideas about other terms that could be better defined. Again, we've seen, unfortunately, we've seen kind of that divide between what planning and zoning looks at, or reviews what they come to the staff report with, what an understanding, right? The tools they come with, I think, anyway, all of us need to be better at that. But I think my idea is the more clear and usable, more clearly defined all of those terms, and I think then that gives more information to planning and zoning, and also to us.
Okay, we can do that. We'll make a list of terms that we think need more clarity. We'll provide some options for those. We'll go over those with Tony. I think one thing that we've taken away is that we're going to delete the check marks and plus marks. We think people are taking those too rigidly. The staff report is a zoning interpretation tool. It is not a planning tool. And we're seeing no discussion of the planning outcomes. We're seeing mostly the discussion on zoning. And so we need to clarify that the zoning discussion shouldn't be preempting a contextual planning discussion. And so we'll try to make sure that we give some recommendations on that. But again, it'll be recommendations on those. We are and have been and remain concerned about the standards. 7 years later, y'all shouldn't be debating whether
That's right.
all the standards apply, some of the standards apply, sometimes you apply them all, sometimes y'all don't apply them all.
That's exactly.
And it is not good for us in terms of consistency, and it's actually, and the us there is the royal us for the city, but it's also not good for us as the planning department, because that means an applicant can't get good, consistent answers from us. And more importantly, is we can't ensure equal protection under the law for all of our applicants if we're not giving the same answer to everybody. So I think that's one of the things I would highlight. We certainly can look at that and bring something to you on that at your next meeting.
Sure. And I get what you said. Let me just say this real quick. You were talking about the staff report being that we're not looking at it as a planning instrument. You know, we're looking at for zoning.
Well,
Is that what I heard
I
you say?
think that it's not just y'all. I think we have the public doing that as well. We're not receiving planning context, and I don't know if that means that we want to go back and think about adding planning context to the zoning report, or if we want to think about it a different way. It used to be there was more discussion between the planners and the council during the discussion point. Since there's not, we may need to anticipate your questions or the public's comments and questions and include more planning contextual comments in the report if it's being deferred to as both the planning and zoning report. But we need to talk about it in-house and,
Right,
and
sure.
get you some recommendations.
Right. I guess the only comment I was going to make, and I get that, and if that would inform us more adequately by looking at that planning tool or planning component as well, that's great. But at the end of the day, when we're not, I suppose we all could try to be, but we're not the zoning experts. We're not, and that's what we rely on. That's why we look at the staff report to determine this variance request, and that sort of thing. I mean, the staff. I find the staff report very useful with regard to variance requests and whether those meet, our idea. Now, if you thought you wanted to get rid of the checks, the pluses or the checks, what would you suggest instead?
We would suggest we just go back to what we were using before. We thought that in a world that has become increasingly a lighting of text and more visually interpretive, that might be a quick read, and then people would deep dive into the text. And we're not sure it's as helpful as we had hoped it would be. And so, and I'm not sure that that's a y'all thing. We're also worried that the public is seeing that yes, we've passed that. What we're saying is we believe it meets most of the standard or the intent of the standard, and I think people are seeing it as more of a yes/no, and we might want to rethink that a little bit.
And I would agree with your point completely. It's in the city's interest as a city government, and it's in the interest of our applicants to achieve better consistency in how we apply the standards. When we are all over the board, like quite often we have been, and that includes the Planning and Zoning Commission, it really undermines our authority to make these decisions. And it's so I think it's anything we can do to kind of get more consistency on how we apply the standards, whether it should be all of them, half of them, 3/4. I'll take any work on that you can give us.
Okay, because I concur. I think it undermines confidence in the decision-making. I think it undermines credibility, legal stance, and frankly, we've been all over the place for the last 2 years.
Yes.
In my opinion.
And even as we're looking at this personally, I mean, and I appreciate that. I'd love to sit down and understand this more about how
Love to
this could
have that
be
discussion.
a better tool. So that's great. Give me 1 second. I was going to say.
But if I think overall, and while you're formulating
ahead.
that thought, what I'm hearing overall is that you would like a staff report recommendation over something that offers clarity, consistency, and more definition for everybody involved, both the decision makers, the submitters, and the public commenters.
Yes.
Right. The other thing I'd be very curious about the opinion of planning, what planning thinks, is when we are looking at variances, can we at all ever put sort of a upper limit on the percentage of variance that's allowed? I mean, that was some of you know, that is, do we want to cap, you know, the request for variances? I mean, that's kind of tricky, but, you know, even at, anyway, there's been times we've, you know, we allow 1% variance on somebody who's building a pool. And it really, in my tenure, I don't remember requests for very large, you know, variances before. I know the little ones seem to come across our desk more often. Any rate, that would be something to look at or think, could that even be reasonable? Or would the council even have any thoughts about capping the amount of variance that could be requested?
Well, in a more general sense, standard number 8 is this variance the minimum amount of variance that will allow the applicant to have a reasonable return on his investment? That kind of addresses in a very general way your point, I think.
So we're going to have to certainly take time to prepare something and come back. But I would say that in general, in my planning experience, that is a handicap to the council, other than using standard. I think the standard is intentionally written that vague by attorneys to allow for the flexibility that the council needs to exercise when it sees a variance that warrants it. Variances by their very nature are site dependent. And whereas if somebody asks for a 4-foot variance and that is 4 feet beyond and it's 100% variance, that's not the same as somebody asking for a 60-foot variance and it's 60 foot beyond. They're both 100%, but that's playing the statistics game. So I think it's intentionally written that way by legal to make sure that you're not binding future councils if you put a maximum on it. It doesn't mean that we couldn't talk to Tony about common sense standards that might put a cap on it, but I don't think that's I think it's written the way it is and it works the way it is throughout the state for a reason.
I always suspected it was Tony's fault. I just didn't want to say that out loud.
Did you feel my boot print on your neck? Because that was not my intent.
But I did feel Eric's. It was really.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, we've all done that, so that's okay. You'll recover, I promise.
Monica, I have a question about
Yes, sir.
how that process is communicated to the public. It seems like there's a lot of conversation right now about the process, and I don't know what they know and what they don't know and how they've been told about the process.
So I would ask for clarification. Are you talking about how the public knows or what the applicant knows?
How the public knows.
So the ordinance is online, and hopefully it remains fairly static over time. If the regular attendees that come to our meetings, they should be very well aware of the standards because we use the same standards for every variance we consider. We haven't been very successful in communicating the regularity of standard use. I'm not sure that the general public understands that. We have some members of our public that are more attuned than others.
They talk about push and pull. It seems
Dr.
like
Mayo,
what
which
we're
is-
doing is.
Tim, speak in his microphone.
Oh, you didn't put your mic on, or speak more into your mic.
I'm sorry. They talk about push and pull advertising or online kinds of things. It almost seems like what we're saying is it's there if you're interested in it. But how do people make that leap? How do they know that it's there if they're interested in it?
The honest to God truth is and this is going to sound a little terse, but it's across the board. People don't care about something until it affects them. They're not out there. They're not reading it. We could send a mailer to everybody's front door, and it would end up in the recycling.
That's it.
People care when it is subject specific and it affects them, and then they get involved. And that's when we get to educate about process and procedure. It is likely the most boring topic in the whole zoning ordinance for people. Sorry, Tony.
Mhm.
If you would like for us to do an article in the newsletter or put something on social media, we are happy to do that. This is not a declining to try to educate the public, but if we're putting information out on comp plan where you get to decide what the future of our city looks like, and our attendance is 12 to 15 people, what we see is people like to come in after the fact. They don't really participate on the front end. And so what I would say is planning department remains more than willing to try to educate people about procedure, but it's going to be not unlike educating them about the procedure on dangerous dogs. They're not going to care about it until it applies to them or something that they are interested in. You let me know what efforts you'd like us to tackle, and we'll be more than happy to do it.
I was going to call out Jennifer, and she seems to be doing a great job of getting things out there that people access. And obviously, it's a totally different topic, but I wonder if there's a way to put a lipstick on that pig and get it out there so that people can see it.
We can certainly make it more available and accessible. We can pull those section standards out, create their own web pages where people can review the standards. Yep, there are other ways we can put it out there, and then we can count the hits that page gets. And we can push it out proactively in social media and count those hits. I mean, this is something that policy wonks read, and attorneys. So I'll make sure that when we come back with a report, we have a list of ways we're going to make it, highlight it for accessibility and make people more aware that it exists.
Good.
I can't promise readership. Any other direction for the staff report that you want to see us include? Carrie, I know that you've been a outspoken person about inconsistencies on variance decisions. Anything you think didn't get hit?
I just want to be consistent across the board. Thank you for asking, Monica. But I just want to be consistent across the board, the way that the procedures that we do. And sometimes we'll say we can use this many variances, this many standards. And then another time we'll use only one or two. So I just want us to make sure that we're consistent with every applicant that comes in.
Eric, did you have anything else?
No, I think I've covered it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I look forward to reshaping this
Okay.
to be a better tool.
Okay, and Eric, Rick, I know you were it makes no sense to apply all the standards. Are you still in that ballpark? Okay.
I'm with Rick.
But I think defining it would certainly be helpful. And another thing, with your checks and your pluses and whether it meets it or not, and then y'all were hoping, I value very much the planning department's
I do
input
too.
on all decisions, variances, zonings, whatever. And so if it's written or if we just go back to not just taking, if you mentioned maybe writing a report to go along with it or whatever, but I think that y'all can help contextualize and give us a big picture on a lot of that stuff that I may not, pick up on, so.
Well,
I
a lot of
appreciate
that used to get communicated through discourse prior to the meeting, y'all dropping in, speaking with us, or speaking with the city manager where we're in the office and having those discussions, or it was discourse in the meetings. And since that's not occurring, I see
Right.
that as a deficit for the decision-making process
I
that
agree.
maybe is adding to the struggle. So however we can best be of service, if you will let us know, we'll make ourselves available, we'll add things to the report, or we'll schedule a meeting in John's office if you like.
I like
Not a quorum, but
Yeah, no, exactly.
we'll be happy to provide that context.
Right.
Pulling in
Thank
Tony
you.
as necessary.
I will say later in the agenda, we're talking about ex parte, and that's going to have an influence on how we interact with these applications
Yeah.
ahead of time, so that might also affect what you're coming up in your report. If we get rid of the ex parte thing, we can be more involved with you and applicants
Right.
prior to
That's right.
So
Well,
we'll see what
ex parte
happens on
never
that.
applies to staff, so, not staff, not the manager, not legal. So, but it might have some more contextualization for, anecdotal comments from the public and desires.
Okay.
Stay. You're
Yes,
up
ma'am.
next. Again,
Sit,
kinda, sorta.
stay.
Are we good for? You're so, I just love how well she behaves. Right, Ken? Oh, no, okay. All right, thanks, Monica.
I'm trainable.
You're amazing.
Mm.
And again, congratulations on your national award. You are very trainable, apparently, or you're training, anyway.
Thank you, that's kind.
And this might be, I don't think this occurs, what I want to look at is the alignment of information provided to planning and zoning with materials presented to the council. I had a perception that sometimes we, the council, between the time planning and zoning meets and by the time the issue gets to council, we have more information. Something's come to light, or something seems to, or come from a different perspective. But that, I could just be completely off base. And and not to put you on the spot at all, but are there ever times when between the time planning and zoning is met and council it comes to council that planning has said, oh, and added documents, I think? Anyway.
Yes.
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 Okay.
Always. So, to make sure I'm communicating this, I'm not prepped for this.
I know.
So
Yeah.
I'll give you a couple of comments and then I will defer to preparing a report for you. In between the two public hearings, we allow for a couple of changes that you may see, different documentation that comes in. I'll look to Tony to yell at me if I've done something that I need to take back. But first of all, there is information that the Planning and Zoning Board may have requested. They may say, this looks pretty good to us. We're still concerned about this one item. The one that comes to mind is entertainment facilities, maybe 3 years ago, and they wanted a kind of a safety report to go with it, or a comment from police chief to go with it when it went to council. Okay, so you may have planning and zoning request a specified piece of information that goes to council. You may also, and what you're seeing is a whole lot of public comment that is either being rechewed and represented, or it's reacting to the public hearing and it's being it's being reframed or added to or represented. So you're getting not only a public comment from before the Planning Commission, but then you're getting a reactionary comment after the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're required by law to give you both.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
when that record goes up from you to the court system, there'll be more documents added in between. It'll be city minutes and, other things that we may have received. So in between each public hearing, there is always going to be an addendum of some form of documentation. Some of it will be anecdotal, like public comment. Some of it will be quantitative, if asked for by the Planning Commission. There's very rarely, and I hope I'm not misstating this, because I've, in our succession planning, turned planning and zoning, or not planning, but zoning over to Molly last year. There is very rarely a big change in the staff report.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, it's pretty much the same staff report with a couple of addendum sentences. This was the conclusion of the Planning and Zoning Board. Here's some of their major comments. Or here was the vote count. The Planning and Zoning Board asked for a count on event facilities for blah, blah, blah. And that is also included here. But usually it's called out, and usually there's not a big change in the Planning and Zoning report. That's what you should not see a whole lot of change in.
Okay.
And you
that's
shouldn't
great.
see a swing in the recommendation.
Perfect, and that's good to know. I guess I just was trying to think, how could we more align with planning and zoning a bit, in terms of, anyway.
The only way you could do that would be to forestall people's First Amendment rights, and
No, okay.
and cut off the record at the Planning and Zoning Board, and I don't think we can do that,
No,
nor
I'm-
would we want to do that.
And sorry, I'm not referring to public comment
Okay.
at all. I'm referring to staff input.
Oh, okay.
Like additional staff input for a clarification of a point or such that the council sees that planning and zoning did not. So information that would actually
And when
maybe
you
even create a shift.
Can I ask for clarification right quick? When you say planning and zoning, are you talking about the board or are you talking about staff?
I'm talking about staff.
Okay,
Staff.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes, I don't.
Yeah, just want to make sure I'm listening correctly. Okay, keep
You'll
going.
be planning, they'll be P and Z.
Okay, like it. The board and staff works for me too.
So I guess I'm wondering if there a time, or I think that, so I'm not referring to public comment. I mean,
Okay.
you can't stop that up to 5 minutes before we come to our city council meeting. But I just mean staff information, clarification, that sometimes will maybe shift the way the issue's perceived because of additional information that P and Z did not have.
There may be a further clarification. Shouldn't be a full shift.
Okay.
It might be a clarification based on information received at the public hearing. Just like y'all, we're reacting to the information that we receive. There is a P and Z report that we provide to them, and there is a mayor and council report that we provide to you.
Right.
They should be very similar, but it doesn't mean we're not gonna do our job and respond to information that we either receive or hear at the P and Z meeting or before it gets to mayor and
Right.
council. We may have information that's received or the public's drawn out a comment that we didn't see. We're not perfect, and we would want to be able to respond to that before we draft the mayor and council report. So, or
just-
it would be responsible for us to do so.
And just to circle back to when you first started speaking, I'm not asking for a report on this. I do not want you to use your precious time
Okay.
to report on, I don't think, unless the rest of the council does. I just want some clarification or some thinking about if, and it, like I said, it may be a misperception on my part, but I just always hope that whatever information that we get at the end at the council is the same that P and Z saw.
Right.
Okay.
So one of the things that I would clarify there is by report, I mean report. It could be a verbal report. What I need it to comment the most responsibly would be to interact with Molly and Jill and us have a discussion about that and then make sure that we're providing you full information. I'm kind of doing it off cuff a little bit today, and
That's it.
but
It was more of a information item, really.
Yeah,
as
okay.
more than an action item.
okay, no, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that we will report, but that doesn't mean a 51-page tome. It might just be here's what collectively we
Okay,
have
super.
discerned.
That's awesome, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
No, I'm done. I think.
Did that answer your question, Council?
Yes,
Are
thank you.
Good.
Thank you, Monica.
Anybody else have anything on that I should be paying attention to? Thank y'all. Appreciate
Thanks,
your
Monica.
time.
Appreciate that.
Appreciate yours.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Joyce, discussion of potential revision to the noise ordinance with Chief McAvaney.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Chief
Stewart
McIlvaine,
as well, yeah.
yeah, we had a discussion back in February about, I can't remember if it was initiated by me or by the chief, to be honest with you.
It was both.
Both. We decided that maybe we should take a look at the noise ordinance, and the chief came up with a recommendation for replacing, I believe the recommendation is to replace 46-6 of the ordinance, the nuisance ordinance, to replace it with what chief has just passed out to you here. And the only, I'll do a comment, Chief, after you kind of explain what it is you're thinking is a better version than what we have currently.
Sure. Thank you. So as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, we had a discussion. Think we were getting ready for State of the City, or maybe a little bit before then. But he had asked me if I thought that there were any ordinances that may need to be tightened up or looked at. I mentioned the noise ordinance, and I think that was something that was on your radar as well. So I went ahead and looked at our current noise ordinance, and I did see some gaps that might need to be tightened up. So our current ordinance relies heavily on a fixed 100-foot standard. It doesn't clearly address several common situations that we find ourselves in today. So from an enforcement standpoint, that creates challenges with being consistent across the board. From a community standpoint, it doesn't always reflect how noise actually impacts our residents. The way our ordinance is currently written, the revision is intended to try to cover those gaps. I also want to note that we're not experiencing an overwhelming volume of noise complaints within the city. However, as the city continues to grow and becomes more dense, these types of issues tend to increase, and updating the ordinance to make it more enforceable and more easy to abide by just makes sense. So what the proposal does is, it establishes a clear definition of what's plainly audible, provides a consistent standard for both enforcement and the court, and it allows officers to enforce the ordinance without requiring any specialized noise meters or anything like that. Plainly audible by the human ear. Second, it introduces a time-based standard. So for instance, noise during the day, when businesses are open and kids are at school, is not as bothersome as it is in the dark hours when people are trying to have the quiet enjoyment of their home, go to sleep, or they have young children. So it does introduce a time standard with regards to distance, 300 feet or 100 feet, depending upon the time of day. And third, it shifts the focus to property boundaries. Rather than relying on a simple fixed distance, it considers whether noise is impacting neighboring properties, which is how residents actually experience noise issues. It also addresses some common real-world situations. For instance, accountability for parties and large gatherings, because the proposed revision defines what a person in charge is. So the person in charge of a large gathering or large party would be responsible for ensuring that everybody in attendance is abiding by the noise ordinance. It also provides provisions for multifamily housing, which is our current ordinance does not address. Those with shared walls, be it townhomes that may get built in the future or apartment complexes. It clarifies construction noises, landscaping hours, creates reasonable limits to those while still allowing necessary work to get done. We've gotten complaints on Academy Street about construction at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So this would definitely help us enforce that. It also aligns our current noise ordinance, it aligns the firework provisions that Georgia law updated while maintaining protections from unreasonable disturbances from fireworks. It does include exemptions for emergencies, such as public safety activity, normal business operations. It allows for special event permits so that the community events and festivals can happen within defined parameters, because those, like Madison Fest, may violate the noise ordinance, but there would be an exception for those special type of events so that we wouldn't enforce it on those there in attendance. So overall, it's not about eliminating noise in the community altogether. It's about preventing unreasonable disturbances that impact our residents' ability to enjoy their homes, while still allowing normal daily activity, commercial, and community activities. It provides a clearer, more balanced approach that's more enforceable. So this proposal is a request to review our current ordinance and ensure it reflects the needs of our community today and in the future. In the package that I gave you is just a brief rundown of the changes. A copy of the proposal, because I was under the impression that the existing noise ordinance was in the agenda packet. And then just for examples, some neighboring communities, Social Circle in Greensboro, copy of their noise ordinance that's there, so you can see how our neighbors are doing it and how they might not be doing it the right way. But I think this is just a starting point, if I'm correct, Mayor Pro Tem, and we can have a discussion about it. So if anybody has any questions, I know it's a lot to digest in a short amount of time, but I'd be happy to answer.
Yeah, I have a kind of a question and a comment. We all have different tolerances for different kinds of noise. I can live with, personally, I can live with the fireworks on July 4th. It's one day of the year. That's not a big deal to me. What bugs me all the time is vehicle noise. It's pickup trucks.
Now-
And you have, the existing ordinance seems to me to be remarkably vague. What we currently have under the noise ordinance, 46-6, talking about trucks that can't be operated except through a, quote, except through a muffler or other device which should effectively prevent loud noises. Is that enforceable whatsoever, to write a ticket?
So with loud exhaust, state law, Title 40, under state law, already addresses that. I removed in the proposal vehicle noises because it's already addressed under state law. There's no need to have a double standard there. State law's already in effect. The same, pardon me, code section that we could write for somebody with excessive volume from a radio applies to engine noises and muffler noises as well. If you can hear it from over a certain distance, then it's a violation of excessive noise coming from a vehicle. I've already spoken to a couple municipal court judges, not just ours, but others, and the judicial opinion on that is that that's an applicable enforcement mechanism for us to utilize.
Because, just Tuesday night, I was sitting, having something to eat at Hard and Crown on the sidewalk, and there's a bunch of restaurants that have sidewalk dining now. Ever since COVID, people have kind of rediscovered sidewalks. I mean, everybody wants to eat outside, and Ricardo's is. I mean, there's all the restaurants seem to have outside dining. And during that 1 hour I was there were probably at least 3 times that really irritating, noisy trucks that didn't even just come by in front of us, but a block away, and you can hear them. And I know in your suggestion, Chief, I believe it's under your suggestion part, section 9.128, or maybe that's existing state code. Again, the wording is, you can't operate a motor vehicle, quote, without a proper muffler in good working order and in constant operation to prevent excessive or unusual noise. Again, that seems just so vague. Can you actually write a ticket? And my second part of that question is, has our department written tickets for noisy trucks?
We have written tickets for noisy trucks in the past. Not under our noise ordinance, however, under Title 40 of Georgia state law.
The state
traffic
law.
Enforcement. Yes, sir, for excessive volume. And part of that is because it's a plainly audible standard. If you can hear it with your ears, you're more than 100 or whatever the distance is away, then it's a violation. Now, like certain trucks do have modified exhaust systems, and there is a section in Georgia state law that allows us to enforce improper exhaust. But we're police officers, not mechanics. How are we to know what's a factory exhaust and what's not?
Yeah.
What's easier to enforce is what I can hear with my ears. So when we address those loud vehicles, we do it under the excessive volume from a vehicle section instead of the improper exhaust section. Because if we wrote them under improper exhaust when we go to court, one of the first questions that if they have a defense attorney is going to ask is, are you a certified mechanic or this and that? No. Well, how do you know? So it's just a lot easier to write it under that excessive volume from a vehicle for that particular circumstance than it is through a noise ordinance per se, or excuse me, the modified exhaust.
Do my colleagues share the same concern about truck noises that I do, or is it?
Well, I was just going to ask you, Council, when you heard the door, what they saw the horse in the motor, or was it just?
I just envision high school kids with glass packs they bought at one of our 6 auto parts things that just really don't come anywhere close to reducing the noise as it should.
Yeah. I agree. I worked a midnight shift for a number of years early in my career, where I get off work at 6 or 7 in the morning, and the last thing I want to hear at 10 o'clock in the morning is either a loud radio or engine noise rattling the picture frames on my walls and waking me up in the middle of trying to get restful sleep. So it is things like that are near and dear to my heart, which is why I wanted to get you guys a draft in order to try to clean things up.
I'm thinking a couple of years ago, we did some work about this. I thought we had talked about decibels or something. I can't quite remember.
Well, that was one of my dead-end projects, Carrie, to be honest with you. I found an ordinance in Covington that used decibel readers, and I actually tested one out up on North Main, actually. Found a whole bunch of noisy vehicles. Went over to Covington myself, talked with the assistant police chief, who said it's on the books, but they've never written a ticket based on that law. I talked to a couple of line officers. Their vehicles didn't have the noise readers in their equipment. So it was kind of like, okay, great. Well, that was kind of a failure. So they had the idea, but they didn't have the mechanism to actually make it happen. One of the officers I talked to didn't even know that they were that there was a law about the noise decibel reading. And this was in Covington, kind of embarrassing, to be honest.
Right, I remember that. And right now, it's so many young kids that have the trucks with the, whatever you call, I guess the exhaust. I don't even know what it's called because I'm definitely not a mechanic either. But they're all really loud, and they're sitting up high, and they're kind of up in the front and down in the back. In the back, what are they called? Squats. Okay, so it's a lot of kids have squats. My son has a squat. So it is a lot. I don't know how we can actually control it. I don't know, but it's a lot of it.
Well, a lot of that is being in the right place to hear it. And sometimes you can hear it from over the hill.
Yeah.
It's like the officer is sitting over by the ministry complex across from the Madison, on the other, over by near the Chop House.
Okay.
They might be able to hear it, but they can't see it yet. But by the time they see it, guess what that driver sees? They see the officer, and next thing you know, the radio gets turned down, or they're not loud on the gas pedal and revving it up. Because we need to not only be able to hear it, we need to be able to identify. It's absolutely, without a shadow of a doubt, coming from that vehicle right there. We can't just spitball it. So it is difficult at times, and in the areas where we're having that in the middle of downtown, sometimes it's open and a police car does stick out. So it's difficult, but doesn't mean it's not enforceable.
So let me ask you this: do our officers have the capacity to measure the decibels?
I believe we have 1 decibel reader. I don't know if it works. I don't like the decibel readers. I like the plainly audible standard because it's more defensible, and it actually is court defensible because Athens Clark County uses a plainly audible standard. And their noise ordinance was challenged all the way up to the Supreme Court.
I would think that the decibel reader would be more defensible, only because audible is pretty subjective. I mean, loud is loud, don't get me wrong, but if I was saying, that was 85 decibels or 106 decibels, that,
if you can hear somebody's music from 100 feet away, then.
I got you. No, that's fine. It was just really a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Mayor.
Stop sign at College in North Main and wait for the kids coming out of high school. You have plenty of loud ones right there with no loud ones.
Yes, ma'am.
Chief, would the, Mayor,
Sure.
would the state law also provide for enforcing Jake brakes or air brakes on trucks that don't want to hit their?
State law doesn't apply to the engine braking. We're not allowed to say Jake braking because Jacobson Company doesn't like you misusing their name. But we do have an engine brake ordinance that's on the books here in the city already. State law doesn't touch engine braking ordinance or
And
engine
because
braking.
we have it signed, I think.
Yes, I know we have it signed on 278 coming into town. I think I may have seen one other sign, but all the main thoroughfares should have that on there. If they're not, well, I'll work with Sean to see if we can get the proper signage back up. But it is something that does cause a significant amount of noise. And since the engine braking is already covered by existing city ordinance, I removed it from the proposal for the noise ordinance revision because there's no need to cover it in 2 separate code sections. It's already satisfied by one particular area that's a standalone engine braking ordinance. It didn't need to be in a noise ordinance as well. It just makes it a little confusing. But, yeah.
Could you, at your convenience, supply the council with a report on the number of tickets that have been written over 6 months or whatever
Be happy to.
for that specific noisy vehicle?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Because I think a little enforcement, kind of like the speeding suggestion, a little more enforcement might be beneficial. But I appreciate your work on this suggestion for this ordinance change.
Sure, and if council would like some more examples from other cities similar in size, I'll be happy to do the legwork to get those as well.
Okay. What are you gonna do to control all that noise at Memorial Day?
Oh, come on. So what are our next steps with this?
Well, we've got the suggested, I mean, I guess
Revisions.
we all have to decide if we want to remove 46.6 from the nuisance ordinance and put in what the chief is suggesting here.
Okay.
I guess that's the next step. And
Yeah.
that's your recommendation.
Yes, the proposal replacement would be a part and parcel replacement for 46-6 is my recommendation. And of course, I would appreciate any feedback council might have with regards to its current draft language form.
Mhm.
If you want to change things around, that's completely fine with me. You know, look, I just want to make sure that it's something that's enforceable, defensible, and applies consistently across the entire city in order to
And-
help people have quiet enjoyment of their homes, which is the whole point of the matter.
I joke about motorcycles, but seriously, do we have motorcycle issues at all? Are there a lot of motorcycles in Madison?
There's a lot of through traffic on 441 bypass and 278. For folks going to and from I-20 or down toward the state park, there's a lot of motorcycles go down 278 to the state park. You know, like motorcycles, other than, you know, being hard to see at times. I mean,
And Jim, there is at least one motorcycle rider locally who just loves to blast his PA system. But I believe state law prohibits wearing earphones when you're driving a motor vehicle, so the only way you can hear his music is his radio, and not, is that right?
Not anymore. That was found to be unconstitutional, to having earmuffs on or earbuds in. It's still on the books, but
Oh.
it's not something that we can enforce. That was appealed to the Georgia
Oh.
Supreme Court years ago and found to be unconstitutional.
So his solution could be to get some earbuds or,
So I know, because I was a motorcycle officer for a while and used to live a little dangerously. I probably shouldn't have, but the helmets, they do make little earpieces so you can have a phone call while you're talking, or you can listen to your radio, like radio. But those are more easily used with a fully enclosed helmet, not something that just covers the top of your head.
Right.
So-
I do like his music personally, but I'm not sure everybody does.
So, do we wanna, I mean, we wanna look at this proposal, but do we want to have it come up at the next council meeting? Do we wanna come back to the next workshop with any revisions or changes? I mean, how do?
My recommendation would be to have it again in a work session to try to finalize the details out
Okay.
before we go to full council
agree.
session.
Okay.
All right.
Any other
Sounds
questions?
good.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for working on
Chief.
this, this is great.
Appreciate that. Okay, Mr. Piver, the ex parte discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm linking up all these things with the difficulties that we've had with the variance provisions. And also, probably deals a little bit with that E section where you were talking about what the planning commission report should look like, but the underlying standards of the variance provision is what's creating a lot of the confusion on that. And variances are really specialized. It's not your general zoning. It is a special process that you go through to make exceptions And so it has some special regulatory parts to it. You are always a legislative body, even though they call you quasi-judicial sometimes. And so my recommendation to you is you do away with what are duplicative and unnecessary provisions at the back of your zoning ordinance dealing with campaign disclosures, which is already dealt with in the state law regarding Zoning Procedures Act. You have the same form come to you regardless of whether you have that provision in there or not. Ex parte communication makes no sense to me. It's handcuffing you guys from having discussions with applicants and opposition, and frankly, it does apply to your planning staff because they've got an opinion about one way or the other how this variance should be voted on. And so they would fall into that category too, and so you need to be able to have those communications. I do encourage you not to have somebody with you, another council member, not a quorum, or a staff member when you're talking to folks, just so there's no question about what was said during the meeting.
Right.
So what I just handed out disposes of those provisions. And just to give you an example, it is really necessary that you be able to meet with an applicant that has a complex construction project in your downtown and know exactly what they are doing and be able to tell them what your concerns are so that they can change those things while that process is going on. And you've handcuffed yourself in a way that's unnecessary, and so this just disposes of those things.
Good.
Second step in that process, and maybe going back up to a little bit of E, is, and Molly had really given me the assignment of doing a first draft on the variance modifications. And so the variances themselves, the way your required findings are written is just not really well done. And so there are 3 of these, 4, 5, and 6, that are, what it would be is the applicant created the problem for themselves. Well, they shouldn't get a variance if they create the problem for themselves, period. Because
right.
it's that should be a trigger point that staff really looks at and says, hey,
Self-inflicted
you don't
one.
qualify. Same thing with authorizing something that's banned by your ordinances. You can't change a zoning ordinance by variance just for one person. And if they're asking for that, then it should be checked off as a no. You can ask the council to change the ordinance, but there are 3 of those that should be staff-driven changes. And then from there, it's just more definitions. What is a hardship, and how do we give you standards? And it's never going to be easy. It's not the same thing as the zoning ordinance application. This is a hardship, and you're trying to balance some equities about, they need 3 inches to build a pool, and it's not going to hurt anything. It's that kind of judicial discussion. So it's never going to be easy as a zoning ordinance change would be. So, but my questions for you are: who makes the decision about variances? And in most instances, there is another body that gives comment. And sometimes it's the Planning Commission that actually grants the variances, and then you have an appeal right to mayor and council. Sometimes it's a separate zoning board of appeals. Sometimes it's the zoning board of appeals actually becomes the council, and usually that's because the council didn't like what the zoning board of appeals was doing. But the reason to use like a planning commission as the initial grantor of a zoning decision with regard to variances is that it saves you having to listen to every pool variance in the city. It sort of gives you a place where they can be dealt with outside of your having to make that decision.
Right.
And then if it's something substantial like you just dealt with, then that can always be brought up to the council level in an appellate review. And my question as we start drafting is, how do you want that to be done? Do you want to flip it to the Planning Commission as the sort of the first group to make those recommendations and then have only those that come up on appeal to you as decision makers. So,
I just wanted to add that in the past, we've actually had that discussion and encouraged the idea of administrative approval of variances, whether it was at John's level, the city manager level, or at the P&Z board level, not unlike the quasi-judicial decision-making that the HPC and the corridor make. Y'all don't see their decisions come up unless they are coming up on appeal and somebody's irritated about those. It would often, the reason we think that that would have been a good idea is because it deletes the things that are, those of you who've served on HPC know there are things that you do road, like backyard fences and stuff like that, things that are common sense variances, and it takes the emotional, and it also takes things off your plate that really shouldn't ever come up to your plate. However, y'all were disinclined to do that, and I want to say, I know this is going to sound defensive, and I don't mean it that way. I want to say that staff didn't decide to add the ex parte contact section to the ordinance. That was driven by a unilateral kind of push by one council member who felt like there was too much behind-the-scenes conversation and backdoor deals between the public and a council person, or between the manager and the public. And so the ex parte exists because of a concern about transparency. And we don't advocate, and we don't have any concern with you removing it. Y'all want to have back or have more conversations, it makes sense to us.
okay, so there was the concept of administrative, so that it can be drafted that way too, so that side yard setback, administratively, they're given some ability to give a 10-foot variance. We can draft in administrative variance issues.
And Tony, we're not asking for that at the staff level. We would prepare a recommendation and provide it to the manager. We want that to backstop with the lead official.
Yep. And it's okay with me. That saves planning commission if you choose them as your, and I'm just saying, okay, how do you guys really want to do it? And then we draft from there.
Because the challenge, I think, will be differentiating between somewhat inconsequential variance requests, the 10-foot pool a little bit more closer to the boundary, and the more recent variance we had, which is a substantial one, which I would not be comfortable having our city manager decide. The pool one, by all means, what we just recently dealt with, that's way too big. So where do you draw that line is kind of a challenge.
I wouldn't draw it that way. I would have anything that the council wants to see be brought before the council. Just have it as a procedure where those of significance get pulled up.
I like that.
Really by council action is what it amounts to.
Tony, could you also include anything that staff doesn't want to make a decision, or that the board doesn't want to make a decision on? We have that with HPC. That's the reason I ask, is they can only say yes because it is nominal. They never say no. If they're going to say no, it goes up to the board.
Right. I wouldn't necessarily do it that way. I would make it a trigger that brings it up only when it's significant, regardless of what's being said.
On a per case basis.
Yes.
I like that, the perk.
So there's no definition of if it meets this criteria, it's just something's coming up or down the pipeline and we say we want to.
Right. There are a lot of ways that we can set that up to make sure that you get your review of significant things. So.
When we first talked about this, I was looking mainly at the ex parte thing, and I'm a little surprised that we're now kind of branching into campaign contributions and so forth. I haven't really read the existing ordinance on the campaign contributions. I have read the ex parte, and we actually have that reprinted, I think, on an attachment and at your desk. So I'm not quite sure about that part of it, but I do know with ex parte, the 1155.2 has this wording. I just wanted to read it to you. It's so crazy. Talking about text amendments, that no unsolicited individual communications with the city council or mayor can take place unless the mayor or council members agrees to such. Is that legal gobbledygook or what? You can't do it, it's illegal unless we say we want to do it, then it's okay.
Yeah, I think they're poorly worded, but they
Yeah.
are absolutely, you know, I didn't even know wouldn't have expected them to be at the back of your zoning ordinance. These things, redefining business interest and financial interest, all of those things have been litigated in the context of the Zoning Procedures Act. They're all standards that are already in place.
Right.
And why you got something that's gonna trip you up
Right,
and not be visible to people, if there's anything that's, to me, hidden or not open to the public, it's this back page of your zoning ordinance regulating your conduct in those ways. But it's so unnecessary because the exact same terms are in the Zoning Procedures Act and well-defined as to when a council member has a financial interest. And what you do is you create confusion. You're just creating confusion for yourself and making it very difficult to apply. And so I went beyond what my assignment was because those three things are all duplicates. They're all right there together. I don't know why I don't know why it was put in like this. It's just really repeating something that's available in another area.
Councilmember Naples.
You have a very extensive ethics ordinance, which we might want to look at eventually, but it really tells you what you need to know. And so when you've got a question of, do I have a conflict of interest? You know, you should really go there. You should have one place where you go and one place where the public goes and not spread out through all your codes with different standards. That's the reason for, it was an easy answer when asked, what do we do with this? Will we get rid of it? And mainly because y'all are having such a hard time in that variance procedure, sort of trying to understand, okay, how many residential units are here and how many can they get rid of? Well, that should have been something that would have been a conference with the applicant to get all your questions answered and, questions with, your opposition wants to hear from you and they want to have a conversation with you too. And I encourage you never to make a decision before the public hearing is over. But to have the communication outside of what we were doing, to come totally cold and blank into that situation is cruel to me.
Very.
It was unnecessary. It's not the way your job works. And you should have freedom to have those meetings so that you can fully understand what's going on.
I think the original motivation was pure. The unintended consequences, I think, have been shown to be kind of detrimental. The only concern I would have is I wouldn't want the public to think that we've removed the requirement to disclose campaign contributions.
You can't. State legislature's already regulated that, said that it has to be done, has to be attached.
I just don't want to see a headline,
Just like
city
the
council
application.
removes all,
Can I add something about the disclosure? I want to be clear. That is because legislators don't ask administrators how to write language. That is a distinct problem. The only entities that are meeting the disclosure requirements on financial campaign contributions are applicants. There is no member of the public that is coming in and filing those things. They don't sign them at the stand. They don't sign them with their comments that they submit. The only burden that is levied against are the applicants. And so we have struggled with how do we get everyone to disclose who they have either had ex parte contact with or if they have made campaign contributions. Nobody's meeting that standard consistently. And so what we need help from Tony with is because we are increasingly over the last 5 years have seen people asking very specific questions about the ethics of the council. I hear you saying we don't need to have it duplicated because that causes problems. I back that concern totally. But now we have more members of the public asking us on a regular basis about comportment to the ethics ordinance. And you want to talk about public education? That's a topic. So we need to be able to make sure that we're applying the disclosure requirement of the state regularly and consistently. We need to be able to share with the public what the communication standards are equally and the accountability standards equally, because they're asking now. That is an ongoing thing. People are much more litigious and in this, John came in and he was like, oh, we need to do more transparency. This is one area that we need a lot more transparency on, because there's a lot of conspiracy theory that's brokered on social media now. And so more and more demands. It's not buried in the back. That's where we were told to put it. But I do think that this is the most read section of our ordinance. This is the one that the applicants read the most, and it's the one the public reads the most, because they want to understand how you're behaving, what standards you're using, what standards the applicant is using, and what standards we're using. So there's no better time to be looking at all of it. So I applaud Tony for actually maybe getting into more of it. We've been asking for this section of the ordinance to be rewritten for at least 5 years now.
I'm not sure I can do one thing about the conspiracy theory kind of thoughts. I think as long as y'all are doing what you're doing, the best demonstration of openness in government decision-making is the debate that happens after the public, and y'all do that plenty. It's not a fixed decision, and everybody knows it, because they can tell by the way it's debated at the council level. And that's always the reinforcement. Now, people say what they say, but if there's some self-interest involved in the decision-making, your ethics provision precludes that. You can't make decisions for the public based on your own self-interest.
That's right.
And since, I hadn't been here long, but it's been exaggerated to me in the circumstance that y'all are very conscious of that. Everything else about favors or favoritism or nepotism or any of those things are dealt with in your ethics provision, and you should be going there to see it. So,
And Mayor, if this were to be put on the agenda of our next regular meeting, this would be subject to a public hearing as well?
It's
Is
a
it?
zoning procedures law. We have to follow advertisement requirements.
Yeah, so it'd be advertising, planning and zoning.
90 days.
Yep.
Start.
Okay.
okay. On the variance procedures themselves, is there a consensus, or do we put it on the work session for the next time, or do you want to have all of those decisions made at the council level, or do you want them to have some culling at least at the planning commission level?
I'd be happy to see planning handle the majority of the variances that,
Planning or
I'm-
or city manager?
oh, well, that's, sorry, sending to the city manager to make a final decision on. I mean, we don't, it's fine that we don't have to be involved in a swimming pool that needs 5 more feet. I mean, I think we have a good planning staff and manager that can make those decisions and understand the full implication of what the request is, and maybe even deny it at some point too. So I'm happy with that. I just want to know,
I concur.
Okay.
I just want to know what is the trigger that sends it to us?
Right.
Yeah, well,
I'll
that's,
make that really clear.
Okay, very
Yep,
good.
Yep.
That's the
And we-
significant piece.
Yeah.
When you refer to the significant decisions, that's what I'm interested in.
Yes, sir.
Is how do we determine what's significant
And what's not?
Yep.
Mhm.
He'll have that.
I will make a recommendation to you and sort those out between city manager and a legislative body that needs to make the decision. Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else on instructions with regard to those standards of variance? I know you need more definition, and you need to know which ones are required and which ones should be dealt with at the staff level. Anything else on variance procedure? Mayor, that's all I have for that item number H.
Okay. I think it's back to you again, Tony. I discussed it on the council's motion, making procedures.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, the gift this time is, are two things. One is a GMA publication on the important parliamentary procedure rules for council members. It's a great document that they published. And then another to look at is an unedited version of an ordinance that was adopted in Walnut Grove that they use, and it's sort of a procedures amendment to your code of ordinances on administration. And the Walnut Grove version comes from an edited version of the city of Snellville procedures provision there. So there are two cities that use these as guidelines, and so Snellville, I don't know how long y'all have been paying attention to it, but Snellville had some significant difficulties between mayor and council getting along. And so that's why they were so refined in how they did their meetings and what was on the agenda and how the agenda got set, and then the procedures for what happens when council disagrees with the chair as to what the next step should be or what was being said. And so it just further defined that to give council some guidelines. Parliamentary procedure is your set of rules. And one of the great things about parliamentary procedure is you can, by acclamation, do whatever you want to. So y'all can have very informal, nice conversations, sort of get off track. And one way, if you choose to, and you're not being, you're not violating a rule when you do that. You did that same informal kind of variation at the last meeting when the group started giving comments concerning where they were with regard to the variance request before a motion was made. So the technical thing that should have happened at the last meeting was there should have been a motion made and a second to take up a specific action with regard to the variance before the discussion started. But y'all chose not to do that. That's perfectly okay. And it sort of worked well because everybody got to sort of put their feelings out on the table. And then from that, a consensus was drawn, and it worked effectively. But if we were to, point of order, Mr. Chairman, we don't have a motion on the floor, there should be no debate. And then the chair, the mayor would enforce that rule and say, yes, you're right, no more comments until we have a motion. And that would be our restrictive rule. And so but you can do those things, but then the body itself ultimately controls how the procedure gets decided. And so the mayor is the chair of the meeting, and so in the normal course, y'all do a really good job of petitioning the mayor the opportunity to speak, which I think is a great. It can be varied, but it's a great thing. It keeps the meeting orderly, and I think there's wisdom in it. And so that the chair sort of controls. The mayor is always the chair, and his primary legislative role is to make sure that the discussion is guided in a way to efficiently get the meeting done. The obligation of the chair is to be impartial to the decision-making process. And when the chair, whether it's the mayor or the mayor pro tem, when the chair wants to participate, they have to surrender the chair, is what it amounts to. It becomes a you can't be an advocate and be the person determining how the procedure is to be followed. Now, that's the hard Roberts rules. And so, like others, in acquiescence, the chair can advocate, and if nobody minds that, it just goes up. Again, it's a point of order, and then a question as to advocacy. So I think that was the question that was on the table as far as this agenda item is concerned.
So when the mayor surrenders the chair, they remain seated on the dais, or do they come?
They can do either one. They can do either one. Yeah, they can advocate. They still sits as mayor in the voting capacity. He doesn't get to vote. The mayor pro tem would then step up. If the mayor pro tem were advocating, then you have to elect another chair to actually preside over it impartially.
Right.
Because our city charter does empower both the mayor and the city manager to engage in the discussion. That's in our charter. No vote for either one unless it's to break a tie, but there are specifically allowed to engage in the conversation. But to Jim's point, are you suggesting that you need to make an announcement? I'm going to relinquish the official duties as chair to make a comment? Is that what?
Well, I don't know that it's every comment. It's when you want to take a strong position advocating one side or the other of the. And what's at risk there is not the ability to speak. You know, that they're elected officials, and can advocate. The question is the public seeing an impartiality in the way the meeting is being conducted? Right. The opposition on the other side from what the chair would be advocating, do they perceive as a fair hearing being conducted? That's what that Roberts Rule is all about. It's not about, do you have the right? Yes, you absolutely can advocate whatever you want to, but when you're the chair, you have to conduct the meeting impartially and give that appearance to the people who are watching the public hearing.
And I might add, if I could, Mayor, in the charter is also, I believe it's under the section on duties or responsibilities of the mayor. There's about 3 paragraphs talking in some detail about the process of making motions. It doesn't just apply to the mayor. It's us who are involved in that. And that's really, it's quite a bit shorter than all of this, and it gives you kind of a rough idea of how the process is supposed to go for making a motion, for seconding it, for rereading the motion, taking the vote and all that. But
So, if I may comment, one thing, we were talking about what's in the charter now that allows the mayor and or that gives room for the mayor and the city manager to engage in discussion. But that doesn't necessarily mean, to my mind, advocate for one side or one stand or the other.
I think they can. I don't think anybody on council is barred from taking a position to advocate in favor of one side of it, and when they feel strongly about it, particularly. I mean, they're part of the team.
Sure.
They're the elected, and I think charter is affirming that. They don't always have to be mum when the issue's on the floor. And there's a debate, but it's just the procedural process of conducting the hearing impartially and having a chair that is not involved in one side or the other. Right. That's really what Roberts Rules is trying to achieve. And when council believes that's not happening, then there's this mechanism where there would be a challenge to just the position of chair to substitute somebody who's not advocating to conduct the meeting. And I've only seen that one time. You know, I've been doing this a long time.
Right.
I've only seen that happen one time by council action, and it was appropriate. And in that circumstance. But, you know, most of the time, it gets to be either an insignificant comment that doesn't deserve the procedural significance of substituting. You know, but that's the mechanism to be used to alleviate the circumstance where you have a sense that the chair is advocating in a way that makes the hearing look as though it is not being conducted fairly. So,
And Betsy, just a quick look at the charter, and there may be another section, but under mayor's duties, number 5, debate all questions before the mayor and council. So that means kind of do what we do. And I mean, maybe debate doesn't mean the same as advocate, but it seems like it
So
would.
how do we achieve, I mean, how do we achieve impartiality then? I mean, I'm not, I get all of what you're saying. I don't know what that looks in real life, so.
it becomes a question raised by a member of the legislative body that there's advocacy of the chair and challenging that, and then a majority of council has to agree with that decision. That's the way it gets imposed. It can just be a question, and then you know, the issue gets resolved by the question. That's often with procedural questions that are raised. They just get fixed immediately, like debate outside of a motion. If somebody says something, then you know it doesn't get voted on at that point by a majority to impose that right. It just gets, a motion gets taken and a second gets made, and then the debate goes on like it was before when you're looking at something specific. But, so these are rare. These are rare events, but it is simply, you know, point of order. I believe the chair should surrender because he's advocating the position of the applicant, or he's advocating the position of the opponent. It would be that challenge, and then, you know.
What if the next person in line who the mayor pro tem had already advocated one way or the other?
Then you got to elect somebody who's not in the debate.
And maybe all 5 council members have done that.
Well, then you just go on and, you know, you probably shouldn't say anything to start with at that point and let it remain where it was. If everybody has a strong opinion and there's not going to be a distinguishing feature between one of the council members and the chair at the time, then, you know, you'd best just make a motion and move on.
Well, so, okay, so I'm still trying to figure out how this kind of works. So, on occasion, the mayor has come out very strongly for one position. So what are we saying going forward? Do we say the mayor should remain impartial and not come out strongly for one position or the other unless he steps down from?
I think the first
I mean, I'm just trying to figure-
step is
I
it
wanna
shouldn't be limiting on the mayor. The mayor, when he feels strongly about one side or the other, probably should initiate this himself and say, you know, for purposes of this debate, I feel strongly in favor of the applicant, and therefore I'm going to surrender the chair to the mayor pro tem, and then go at it. You know, participate.
Okay, I see.
You know, have a full scale discussion.
And then I can rule them out of order?
Well, you can. Yes, subject to their review of your decision.
Sorry, Mayor.
Of course. Yeah. Other questions on Robert's rules?
Yes, here's my other question, and it is, so, and I heard you say this actually a couple times after meetings or whatever, but we were talking about the pure procedure. And again, I realize we can have whatever, you know, we can take parts and be in agreement on how we want to implement Robert's rules. But the purest form, you said, was we need a motion on the floor before the debate occurs. Now, that actually then really requires sometimes the motions are complicated, right? It's not just, yes, I vote to approve or deny or whatever. Okay, I'm gonna approve this, but here are some conditions or whatever. And the thing is, sometimes, if there hasn't been some, that either means kind of seeking out other council members one-on-one and kind of getting that motion lined up right away, or during a debate or a discussion prior to making a motion, we come into kind of an agreement or an idea of what that motion should look like. And then we make the motion and debate it. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes. Did we not address that some time ago and decide we could engage in debate prior to an actual motion in a second?
Yeah, I think so, right. And I was just kind of coming back to,
Yeah, again, as the newbie, has it happened since I've been on council?
That decision to allow it? I don't recall the actual details, but not since you've been on, but it goes back a ways, does it not? Didn't we come to that? I don't know.
We did.
Yeah.
If not, and then back in the day when we used to try to do it more formally, I guess, a lot of times somebody would make a motion that said, for the purpose of discussion, I want to make a motion.
I like that.
It didn't mean that motion wouldn't be withdrawn or and then changed. I personally like the discussion before a motion.
Yeah, I do too,
As long as
yeah.
that's copacetic and not giving you any heartburn, but that's me.
It doesn't give me any heartburn for you to do exactly what you want to do in terms of discussion, just like you did. I don't have any problem with doing that. Robert's Rules is really trying to control the debate so that you're talking about one subject and not a million subjects. And so you're trying to focus the legislature's action on a specific item that's before. And so I think in the Robert's Rules, if you're applying that, then you may make the motion for purposes of discussion, this, and this, which is ultimately what you did, in the meeting, in your last variance hearing there. Eventually, a motion hit the floor, and then it got debated again with precision. And so I guess if I were recommending, taking the controls a little bit off of the ex parte part of the process that y'all been restricted by, and having not quorum discussions, but discussions with staff, discussions with applicant, discussions with opposition, and getting more fixed as to what your ideas are, what that motion should be, at least in its initial phase, is a better idea. And then to get a motion on the floor, it lets everybody still then have their discussion in the context of something specific, and then modify it, by amendment. And so that's really the way the process is designed, and I think it has a tighter, more precise way of operating the meeting, so that y'all don't have a lot of discussion, then a motion, and then the same discussion over again in the context of something specific. So.
Thank you. Yes. What's next?
Are there any more questions? Thank you. Well, legal counsel, thank you so much, Tom.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Well, we're down to our city manager's topic. John?
And I'll start, Mr. Mayor, by thanking the good Lord that I only have a few items today. And they're all budget related. The first thing is I just wanted to notify you that our Citizens Financial Advisory Committee, which is now known as CFAC, has had 2 meetings. They're off and running. They're working with staff, and I think they'll prove helpful in the whole budgetary process. I have provided to you a tentative budget calendar for your review, but it talks about starting the process 15 May with a formal public hearing June 8th with the adoption around the 24th. Of course, we've got to work, at least several of you will be in Savannah, so we want to make sure we work around that and leave enough time for any additional debate and discussion. And also, every year I try to start by having informal meetings with council members, and I'd like to offer that as a possibility this coming week, anywhere from Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, if you can fit it in your personal schedule. I'd love to be able to sit down and give you an idea what direction we're headed, and also ask you what your priorities are and what you'd like to see focused on over the next coming year. So I would very much like to hear from council members in terms of what day or time works for them.
You want to meet 202 or 101?
It really doesn't matter. We could do it 2 at a time or 1 at a time. It probably depends on the convenience of when members can come in. And we do have a called meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it?
Is it?
May I, when does the committee meet?
The committee does not, has not set a day and a time like a lot of formal committees do. They're meeting at the call of the chair.
Okay.
And they've had 2 meetings so far. I think ultimately maybe they will, but they're still off and running. They're just starting.
Thanks, John. So we go right into our call meeting. We've already opened it up to discuss gateway signage permit. Aaron?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as discussed earlier, this is regarding 2 requests for traffic signals to Georgia Department of Transportation for our Gateway project. If you have the permits in front of you, they both say Washington Street at Pearl Street. One of those should say Washington Street at Jefferson Street. So that should be corrected before they're signed. But I will go through quickly, so we have discussed it. This is a request for traffic signal to the Georgia Department of Transportation. It reads, the City of Madison and Morgan County hereby request approval for the use of a traffic signal at the location described below, Washington Street at Pearl Street. The other one is Jefferson Street. They're the exact same. Rapid flashing beacon, RRFB, rectangular rapid flashing beacon. Conditions of applications and standards of operations, it reads, in the event that the Georgia Department of Transportation authorizes the use of a traffic signal in the above location, the undersigned agrees to participate in the cost to purchase and install the signal. This level of participation will be determined after a study of the location has been completed. This is part of the project. We know our cost is 20% of construction. We agreed to that when we agreed to accept the grant. Now, construction at this time is not moving forward. That is in the future commitment. But this signal must be installed by the department standards and conform to the authorization, with the authorization issued by the department and the provisions set forth herein. Then cost of operation. The full and entire cost of the electric, energy, and telephone service used to operate the signal shall be at the expense of the applicant without any cost to the Georgia Department of Transportation. The applicant understands that the department may ask for participation in the cost for the purchase, installation, and maintenance of the signal if approved. And again, purchase is 20% of whatever the cost is as part of construction whenever it moves forward. I did some research on the electrical, energy, and telephone cost, and I would expect that to be under $1,000 per year total if they can be on the same meter. And then it goes through inspection and approval. just says that Georgia Department of Transportation has the right to inspect. And then right to revoke. The Georgia Department of Transportation reserves the right to revoke the approval should it, for any reason, desire to do so by giving the applicant 30 days written notice. And in the event the applicant agrees to remove the signal from said right-of-way at its own expense or allow it to be removed by the department. And then we would need that signed and notarized, both applications. Once that is completed, I will upload that onto Georgia Department of Transportation permitting site, and that will begin moving our project forward again. At this point, it's been stalled. So we need this to move forward. It's a critical part of the design package.
So there's nothing the city can do then until you actually get the go-ahead from the Department of Transportation, I guess?
Yeah, so we're just requesting that the signals that were designed or recommended by the designer can be installed. Once they say yes, that will finalize the design or cause the engineer to have to modify the design, and we can move on to the final process to get this design completed. Monica, any other comments you have on that?
It's probably, so the signal permits, I would say, is we've been waiting on those for about 6 months now, maybe 4 months. Once they're filed, that does allow us and may gain us some headway with our request for additional funds. I heard that as feedback. If we budgeted what we said we would budget for the 20% for the sidewalk projects, and we get the signal permits, they see these as major roadblocks. We have been invited to reapply for the 264. So John had asked us to identify what goodwill measures would be necessary for them to consider additional funding, and this would be a step in the right direction to being able to apply for supplemental funding. They want to see us show some good faith. So.
So in your mind, what time frame do you think we're looking at?
Well, this will be uploaded first of next week at the latest. Well, as soon as I receive it, we'll get it uploaded. GDOT will respond within a couple of weeks, most likely, to keep this project moving forward. But the time frame right now has just been held up on us signing the agreement. It's a design issue after that. Once that's done, it goes back to the designer, and we're no longer in control of the timeline. So.
Okay. Are there any more questions from the council? If not, if we get a motion then to approve this gateway signal permit with a signature to allow Eric to move forward. Yes, Monica.
One last thing. This is a signature at the city manager level, not the mayor's level.
Right.
I would like to make a motion that we approve 0018359 Madison Gateway signal permit.
Second.
There any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Those that not vote unanimously, so Eric, you can move forward with the signature of our city manager. Thank you so much. Any public comments? If not, this meeting is adjourned. Yes? John, you have
Mr. Mayor, I think our city attorney would like a brief executive session.
Personnel,
Yep.
okay, all right. So we get a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second?
Any more discussion? All in favor, show of hands. Opposed is none. Go into executive session. Briefly.